I'm really pleased today to be joining my friend and business partner, Virginie Debris, who is the Chief Product Officer at GMS. And Virginie and I have known each other for a very long time. It's nearly 20 years as a customer and supplier. I was delighted to be customer. And yesterday we were talking about, what we were doing 20 years ago. And Virginie said, oh, you knew me from SAP. And I said, no, not SAP. Mobile 365, then Sybase 365. Basically, if you want to see a history of SMS and aggregation and hubbing, you're looking at it now. Okay, it's certainly a French version of that history, but Virginie has been there throughout. But she disguises the years extremely well. So on that note, we're going to jump into the slides, and I'll just start with the very first one, and then I'll hand you over to Virginie to talk about what we're planning to do together. So the real goal today is Mobileum has this fantastic multi-protocol, cross-protocol signaling firewall, and one key element of that product is our SMS firewall. Okay, so we want to take that SMS firewall beyond what is typical for us, which is a deployment on-premise for an operator, where an operator manages it and uses it for various things. And we want to take it beyond that to where operators can really focus on what they need, and that's primarily the monetization of SMS, whilst at the same time protecting their customers. So with that in mind, we've reached out to GMS, and we've known each other for so long. We so much respect for each other. It's a perfect partnership. So together we are bringing to market our joint proposition, and each of us brings something special in this partnership. GMS offer market leadership as the leading SMS hub with a gigantic volume of connections, 500 enterprise customers, managed service partnerships with 40 operators, and that's where we're focused on, because we're very conscious. Many of our customers say, we don't want to manage this ourselves. We want someone to manage it for us, but not just from a security perspective, which is where Mobileum's expertise is, but from a business perspective, the enterprise business, the revenues, the connectivity, acting as an aggregator, and that's where GMS come in. But together, we bring our state-of-the-art, industry-leading firewall, which includes artificial intelligence and machine learning, as well as live subscriptions to bad URLs used for phishing and smishing. So that's what the section we're going to be talking about now is all about. And without further ado, I hand you over to the far more interesting Virginie Debris. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Steve. So let me walk you very quickly through who GMS is. We're an international messaging service provider for mobile operators and enterprises. We've been in the market for 15 years. In reality, we're going to be there for 15 years in next month, or no, in June, in reality. We are the largest GSMA compliant messaging provider in the CIS and South Asia. We have, as Steve just said, 900 plus mobile operators customers and 500 plus enterprises connected around the world. We are headquartered in Switzerland, but we have offices in Kiev, Dubai, Moscow, Islamabad, Singapore. We have points of presence in Brazil and in various other places in Asia. We also have data centers in Switzerland, Germany, Ukraine, Russia. One quick word about the certification, because that's something which is important for our customers and therefore which is important for us. The ISO 27001 and ISO 9001 were certified for both of those. We're also an active member on the various industries like the GSMA, the MMA, and I had the great pleasure and honor to be elected as a board member of the MEF only a few weeks ago. So we are fairly active into those various mobile industries. Moving on then to the real life case study. The goal for today will be really for me to walk you through a specific case study that we had that we thought was particularly interesting, because it was really the summary of what we learned for the past 10 years, most probably on the monetization side. So SMS firewall is in place and working fine. Everybody thinks that we are done, right? So there we are talking about a major telecom group with a global footprint that was globally satisfied with the monetization performance delivered by its SMS firewall partner. The monetized SMS traffic matched their expectation. The firewall was working correctly. The technical team was solving it well. What else? Everything good, done. Even when things do go well, actually ask for more. Despite they were satisfied with the performance, the group was always willing to get more. And then they came to GMS and saying, okay, what can you do for us? Can you add something more on top of what we have, which is already working quite well? Challenge accepted. GMS, and that's not me, that's one of our very strong engineers saying, okay, yes, we're going to do that. We're going to move forward and help you, dear MNO, to even work better with your firewall. So we're talking there about a wide array of markets. Each market has its unique and complex dynamic. Needless to say, I cannot see who are the attendees to that webinar, but in reality, all of us would say that each market is different. You know that. This experience also summarizes 6 months of hard and dedicated work from multiple ends, because it was not only GMS, but it was also the MNO and the firewall vendor. 1,500 plus of hours of remote cooperation. We tested 60,000 routes and services per day, testing 100 plus services daily, 100 plus team boxes had been caught daily. And as I said at the beginning, the collaboration must be very strong with the group and strong as well with the MNOs and the firewall vendor, of course. So let's go through the markets. And for that example today, I took only 2 markets, in fact. So let's go through the market that I would call market A. The first 2 months were what I would call the setup and the discovery. So for that market A, what we've done at first, which is what we recommend generally for all the markets, is really to complete a 360-degree review, to understand what is the A2P traffic status, to understand what could be the partners, to understand the specificity of the ecosystem, the complexity of the business itself, and the market understanding, really. So there we detected some operational and technical issues. We've also identified some loopholes, and we even worked on improving the existing SLAs and the existing procedures that were existing between the group, between the MNO, between the SMS firewall vendor. That's the discovery phase, and you can see on the right-hand side how the volumes increased a little, but then it's still fairly flat. Again, this is the discovery phase. The next 2 months were really the execution of the initial enhancements. So instead of the usual 8x5 testing, we've introduced 24/7 rigorous gray road testing. What we've done as well, which I think is fairly important, is to enable the immediate and automated blocking. That's what we would call auto blocking, integrating to our testing solution. So the concept is relatively simple. When we test, when we identify something, like for example in Simbox, automatically, and that's part of the complexity that I just talked about on the SLA, on the procedures, automatically the blocking was activated on that market, SMS firewall. That's very important because reactivity in those matters is very important, because you have to react very quickly, otherwise obviously the leakage is going through. So therefore we managed to reduce the Simbox average life from 24 hours to less than 1 hour. So in reality you kill immediately the problem as it appears. What we've done also in that period is really to proactively and much more closely engage with the enterprises. We should always remember that And that's where the introduction from Steve was very interesting, because in reality, we should always remember that the goal is not only to protect the network, but the goal is also as well to make sure that the traffic will continue flowing, but through the right path. And that's where this engagement with the enterprises is key, because in reality, you have to make sure that the traffic will continue flowing just through the right path again. So let's continue. The 6 months afterwards, we managed to complete what I would call the 360-degree messaging protection and optimization. And you will see why I talk about optimization and not only protection. Protection is the first thing that we looked at, and we fixed many things already, but then on the previous month journey, as I walked you through, but there we also fixed some home routing that was missing on the STPs. Home routing is really the basics of the network protection, and we can see that sometimes, and yesterday in the sessions, I think it was addressed as well, there are some issues with home routing configuration, I would say. Some leakage could still go through that. Obviously, the classical spam, smishing protection, the basics, but still very important and still have to be very strongly monitored. But something that I personally was not expecting, that our experts were expecting, of course, but that I was personally very surprised to see, is the network optimization that also we managed to do. Thanks to the testing, what we've identified is that, in fact, the delivery rate of the messages was fairly low, 84% only. And in fact, there were multiple mini tiny things. There were things related to the concatenated messages that were not going well. There were a few network elements that were not reacting the way it should. There were some capacity issues on some of the specific elements that we managed to identify thanks to the testing. We've managed to look at things which are actually not messaging protection, but which managed to optimize the messaging delivery, because we managed to increase it up to 95%. So from 84% to 95%. That's also something that I would like you to keep in mind, because I think that's very important as well, and very surprising, I would say. So to cut a long story short, that's a great work on that market A. We managed to get an additional 620 million more messages in 6 months, 23% traffic growth. So we managed to get to 3.3 billion messages per month. That's really massive. So you can see the run rate really massively increased. And that's a mix between the protection, the interaction and the engagement with the enterprises, plus that messaging optimization based on the network optimization that we've been able to identify thanks to our laser focus on the messaging business, because that's what it is. Let me move on. Next market, market B, as I would call it. Globally, the same start, right? We've been requested to work on that market. We start always with the setup and the discovery, which is always that review on the market, visibility on the daily, the weekly, the monthly A2P traffic existing, the potential, the understanding of the various services that do exist on that market. All the basics, I would say, on understanding the messaging ecosystem. We've also identified fairly quickly some cheaters that were compromising the domestic links. Again, I think it was mentioned in one of the other sessions yesterday, the fact that the domestic links are more and more used by those cheaters that are in fact trying to use the domestic links for some of that traffic. So something really to be monitored. We've also identified the classical, I would say, some loopholes in SS7 with the A2P traffic being sent through the P2P pipes. It's kind of a classical, but that's already something that we identified fairly quickly. And slightly more in-depth work in those upcoming 2 months, where we executed on some additional enhancements. So on the left-hand side, you can see the graph where the blue bar is really what happened before us, and the green one is what happened with us. And you can see that there is an increase. It starts usually slowly, and then it increases quite well after we get on with the knowledge of the ecosystem. Obviously, the classical thing, we rerouted international traffic through the legal routes. We won't name them, but they were 100% of the traffic of a search engine that was using a legal route. 100% of the traffic of a messaging app was also using an illegal route. 60%, so kind of sharing the load really, of a social network that was really identified and rerouted thanks to our strong relationships with those enterprises, but also their own aggregators, because they have usually multiple hubs that they use in order to deliver the traffic. So basically, thanks to that, we've really identified and consequently monetized that traffic that was previously undetected, of course. What we've also done, which is, I think, a very important lesson to learn there as well, is we've introduced some specific commercial rates for some premium traffic or some specific engagement traffic. I think it's also important to understand the differences on the market, but as well the differences on the enterprise's traffic. And therefore, we do help the MNO in that, but we did help the MNO in that market B in order to understand what were the specificities of the traffic and potentially really adjust the pricing in order to fit these particular enterprises' needs. Moving on, then the upcoming 2 months, and you can see on the graph really the traffic that was quite nicely going up. Again, there I would talk about the 360-degree messaging protection and optimization, because you will see again there was on that particular case another example of optimization. Again, there was an issue on the home routing. That's not the first time we hear about that, so that's interesting to have a look at that for the MNOs listening. We stopped also the abuse of open SMSs, and we prevented GT faking. That's also a classical, but some are much more difficult to detect than others. So we believe it's really important to keep an eye on that. Another fairly interesting item that we've understood, and this is really much more related to the optimization part of the work that we've done, which is some coding mismatch, data coding scheme, DCS issues between the sender and the receiver. There was an SMPP issue on some of the platforms that ultimately made the message not end up on the handset in the correct way, and therefore the message could not be considered as received the proper way or converted the way it should be. So the conversion rate was not as good as it should be. Then therefore the delivery rate just started dropping. Again, there we optimized the messaging traffic itself. The last one is a very interesting one. It's some content manipulation. You understand how many of the spam filters work, right? They look at the same content of the message, and if you see the same content for more than X number of messages, then you have to block those messages. Then the cheater, I would say, was clever enough in order to manipulate the content just slightly so that it was invisible to the end user. The content seemed exactly the same on the handset, but in fact they were including a zero with space character, so totally invisible on the message, but visible to the firewall that was screening the message, and therefore was thinking that the content was different, and therefore the goal was really to bypass the spam filters of the SMS firewall, but it didn't bypass us. We did catch it. But fairly interesting use case, by the way. So concretely on that market, again, a fairly decent growth, 160 million more messages in 6 months, 18% traffic growth. It's a mix between the messaging protection and the rerouting towards the legal routes, and a mix with that optimization that I just talked about. We believe those numbers speak for themselves. I would like to reiterate that the numbers that I'm giving there are all real numbers on a real use case. The key takeaways then, the success pillars. For me, the SMS firewall is really, the deployment of an SMS firewall is a must-have. It's a prerequisite. It can deliver, obviously, some result by itself. But it's the combination of the SMS firewall plus a dedicated firewall management and messaging expertise that takes the messaging protection and monetization and even optimization to the next level, as Steve said in his introduction, really. So a dedicated SMS firewall management combined with a strong messaging expertise is vital for us. And we've seen that working in real life. The key success factors for us are really the active collaboration of all the key stakeholders. In our example, really, it was fundamental to have the group hub, the MNOs, technical teams, but also commercial teams, because there are many things which are related to the business, by the way. The firewall partner, all those stakeholders must really interact fairly well with each other and must be able to know each other well, to trust each other, to talk to each other. The proactive engagements with the enterprises is key. As I told you, the goal is not really to block the messages. The goal is really to ensure that the messages are propagated through the right path. And obviously, this expertise on the local markets and on the global markets is very important. This expertise and this knowledge of all the different players in the ecosystem is fundamental. Last but not least, the proactive and persistent prediction, detection, and blockage of those threats. This is what we believe is also very important. So the key takeaway for me, firewall deployments, and there you have with Mobileum a really fantastic firewall with you, the management from GMS, and together, as Steve said, we are quite excited to talk about our partnership because we believe that then it gives a 360-degree messaging optimization and protection, which brings a significant increase in revenues, in quality of service, and in the customer satisfaction, which is very important for the MNOs. One last thing, it's the man behind the gun, actually. It's one thing to have a fantastic tool. It's another thing to have the appropriate people in order to handle that and actually play with it and ensure that you take the best of it. And that's it, really. Thank you very much for your time.